Hello friends, today we will discuss about Robert Merton, and so let us start now. Actually, he was the student of Talcott Parsons and lifelong critic. Merton questioned Parsons' theory building strategy, that is, the way Parsons has attempted to develop his theory. Parsons' work appears to be motivated. He argues that Merton argues that Parsons' work appears to be motivated by a desire to address all practical problems of social life. It's a premature theorizing, according to Merton, without empirical basis, based on speculations. He says that such an all-embracing theories are developed by Parsons is not a theory in true sense. It is hardly anything more than general orientation toward data, suggesting the types of variables we must somehow take into account in the course of research. Merton argues that Parsons' attempt at building such a general theory is premature, sterile, and futile because the prerequisite empirical research that is essential to develop such a general theory has simply not been done. Parsons is according to Merton, Parsons is trying to be the Einstein of sociology, while sociology is yet to produce a Kepler. So basically, Merton's theory is based on the mainly criticism of Parsons' structural functionalism approach. In place, Merton advocated for middle range theories building. He argued that middle range theories doesn't fragment knowledge but integrate them. He gave example of Durkheim empirical research on suicide, where he gave 4 empirical generalization on rate of suicide. For example, here Protestants were having more suicide rate than Catholics. Unmarried men had more suicide than married. Men commit more suicide than women. And peacetime condition, the rate of suicide is more than wartime condition. So Durkheim combined all above data into a theory with relations rate of suicide is inversely proportional to solidarity. That means more solidarity in a society, lesser will be the suicide rate, and lesser solidarity, higher will be the rate of suicide. So we have already covered this in suicide lecture of Durkheim. Merton says that macro theories will arrive, but later, after enough empirical researches have been done. Merton has sometimes been called as sociologist of sociologists because of emphasis on methodological rigor. So Merton is sometimes being called as the sociologist of sociologists because of emphasis on methodological rigor. Although Parsons is regarded as the most important structural functionalist theorist, Robert Merton, Parsons' student and his lifelong critic, criticized some extreme indefensible aspects of structural functionalism. So he has criticized some extreme and indefensible aspects of structural functionalism and provided new conceptual insights which help giving structural functionalism a continuing usefulness of relevance. Merton rejected the use of term functionalism and in place used functional analysis. As a sociological methodology and not an ideology, ism used for an ideology. Merton criticized three major postulates of functional analysis developed by anthropologists such as Malinowski and Radcliffe Brown. First postulate he criticized was the postulate of functional unity of society. This postulate assumes that all standardized social and cultural beliefs and practices are functional for society as a whole as well as for individual in a society. Merton argued that it may be true for small primitive society. This generalization cannot be extended to larger, more complex societies. This generalization cannot be extended to larger and more complex society. Merton argued that functionalists should specify the unit for which the given social or cultural item is functional. Moreover, they must make it clear that a given item may have diverse consequences, functional as well as dysfunctional for individuals or subgroups. Second postulate he criticized was the postulate of universal functionalism. It holds that postulate holds that all standardized social and cultural norms and structures have positive functions. That means good for society. Merton argued that this contradicts what we find in real world. Not every structure, customs, ideas, beliefs and so forth have been positive function. Merton argues that the functionalist must focus on a net balance of functional consequences, positive as well as negative, but by no means positive only. So focus should be on positive and negative aspect consequences. Third postulates Merton criticized that was postulate of indispensability. This postulate holds that all standardized aspects of society not only have positive function but also indispensable parts of working whole. This postulate leads to the idea that all structures and functions are necessary for society. Merton argued that no cultural form is indispensable forever, because the function it claims to fulfill can be fulfilled better by alternative cultural forms. A functional analyst, Merton says, should assume that nothing in fact is indispensable. So first of all, a functional analyst should assume, according to Merton, that nothing in fact is indispensable. There are functional alternatives, equivalents or substitutes. In other words, same function served by a given item under changed circumstances may be fulfilled by another item, and it's true. For example, in modern societies where women took work outside the home, some functions of the family such as child care can be performed by other institutions like creches, daycare centers and so on. Now, Merton further argues that these three major postulates rely on non-empirical assertions based on abstract theoretical system. It is responsibility of the sociologist to examine each postulate empirically. Merton believed that empirical tests, not theoretical assertions, are crucial to functional analysis. led him to okay, it's fine. Merton believes that empirical tests, not theoretical assertions, are crucial to functional analysis, led him to develop his functional paradigm of functional analysis as a guide to the integration of theory and research. This paradigm brings out into open the array of assumptions, concepts, and basic propositions employed in a sociological analysis. It helps to make clear how to conduct functional analysis, how to study, what to emphasize upon, and how to locate one's analysis in the logical struggle between conservatism and radicalism. Merton argued that structural functional analysis focus on groups, organizations, society, and cultures. The focus of the structural functionalist should be on social functions rather than on individual motives. Functions, according to Merton, are defined as those observed consequences which make for the adaptation or adjustment of a given system. It's all a function are all about adaptation or adjustment of a given system to achieve some goals. So these are consequences. Merton developed the idea of these functions to explain the negative consequence of a structure or institution for a system. For example, slavery in southern USA clearly had positive consequences of white southern, such as supply of cheap labor for cotton economy and social status, but it also had a dysfunctional, such as making southern states overly dependent on an agrarian economy and unprepared for industrialization. The lingering disparity between the North and South in industrialization can be traced at least in part to the dysfunctions of the institution of slavery in the South. Merton also developed the concept of non-functions, which he defined as the consequences that are simply irrelevant to the system under consideration. So non-function, that means irrelevant aspects of functional analysis. Merton argued that there must be level of functional analysis. Functionalists had generally restricted themselves to analysis of society as a whole, but Merton argued that analysis also should be done on organization, institutions, group, or individual. For example, there should be analysis of impact of slavery on black families, white families, black political organizations, white political organizations, and so forth. Merton further argued that an item might be functional for one group but dysfunctional for another group or subsystem at the same time. For instance, the continued coverage of cricket by Doordarshan may be functional for lowering the crime during those hours, but on the other hand it may breed and promote inefficiency in the workplace. Merton also argues that functional analysts should equally focus on static and dynamic aspects of social structure and institutions. He or she should know that nothing is indispensable, functional alternatives are possible, not everything is functional. There are many social and cultural items which have dysfunctional consequences. These functions, according to Merton, imply concept of strain, stress, tension on the structural level, and therefore provide an analytical approach to the study of dynamics and change. So these functional aspects have the dynamics, have the aspects of change. Merton also argued that a functional analyst should not have intrinsic commitment to any ideological position. Now let us move towards manifest and latent function. This is exclusively mentioned in UPSC syllabus. The concepts of manifests and latent functions were developed by Merton for the more critical functional analysis. Manifest functions are those that are intended, expected, culturally recognized subjective disposition, whereas latent functions are unintended, unexpected, hidden, objective consequences. That means manifest is all about subjective disposition, and latent function is objective consequences. Functions have both intended and unintended consequences. Although everyone is aware of the intended consequences, but a sociological analysis is required to uncover the unintended consequences. Merton made it clear that unanticipated consequences and latent functions are not the same. Latent function is a type of unanticipated consequence that is functional for a given system, a designated system, but anticipated consequence may be functional, dysfunctional, or non-functional. Merton argued that a structure may be dysfunctional for the system as a whole, yet may continue to exist because it is functional for a part of social system. For example, discrimination against female is generally functional for males. Merton evolution of notion of latent function and manifest function and their distinction give a new meaning to functional analysis. This distinction helps sociologists to go beyond the common sense perception of the world. The notion of latent function opens our eyes. It enables us to see the deeper, hidden meaning of many of our social practices and cultural beliefs. It changes the prevalent notion of rationality and irrationality, morality and immorality. So we have to remember all these terms, and these terms will enrich our writing. Now, because even in irrational and immoral practice, we can see latent and necessary social function being fulfilled. The distinction between latent and manifest function helps the sociologist to make a critical analysis of any social phenomena. Merton put the example of Hopi tribe of North America engaged in a complex series of rituals and dance prior to planting their crops to produce abundant rainfall. Manifest function it is. That means intended, what is expected, and that is what is in the mind of layman. For a secular rationalist, he is talking about sociologist, the rainfall doesn't depend on any ceremonial. He or she may conclude that these ceremonials reflect nothing but irrational and superstitious beliefs of the Hopi tribe. For a secular rationalist, he is talking about Merton is talking about a secular rationalist that rainfall doesn't depend on any ceremonial, and he or she may conclude that these ceremonial reflect nothing but irrational and superstitious belief of the Hopi tribe. Merton here wants sociologists. He wants sociologists to look into deeper hidden meaning behind the ceremonials. The ceremonials do not produce rainfall, but they enable the scattered members of the group to assemble together and engage in economic activity. This reinforces their group identity and solidarity. This is the latent function of the ceremony. So he is arguing a sociologist to look into deeper meaning of any function. Now in our society, we can find out the latent function behind the socio-religious festivals like Christmas, Diwali, Eid, and we can find the latent function. Merton argued that sociologists are not laypersons. With their special skills, particularly with their awareness of the notion of latent function, they rediscover new areas of inquiry worthy of explanation. Generally, the social actors are content with immediate manifest function, culturally defined, and do not bother about things having hidden, latent, and deeper consequences. Merton here is talking about a normal person, or we can say a layman, and his thinking. But the sociologist's task is to look for a hidden meaning and aspects of the cultural items and social practices. For example, commercial films may be absurd with their implausible story, music, dance, romance, fight scenes. They may still have some positive functions. These films may strengthen the role of motherhood, celebrate the ultimate triumph of good over evil, and reinforce ideals which may get lost in a rapidly changing world. It is in this regard that commercial films may have latent function and act like a safety valve, restoring faith in the system. Merton further argues that the distinction between latent function and manifest function helped sociologists to open the horizons of sociological knowledge. Merton put the example of Thurston Veblen's famous work Theory of Leisure Class, in which author sought to examine the latent function of the pattern of conspicuous consumption. Veblen's analysis shows how a sociologist can go beyond the manifest function and the pattern of consumption and tell us something new that seems strikingly different from one's common sense perception. Veblen says that the people buy new models of car or TV sets not solely because they want transportation facilities or want to know the world, but also because it helps them to reaffirm their social status. Now let us do some critical evaluation of Merton's latent and manifest functions concept. On positive side, Merton gave a new lease of life to functionalism. It could now account more for conflict and change, because Merton is talking about dysfunctional aspects of any social institutions, structure, culture, and tradition. Now, what is criticism is about? Conservative ideological bias. Critics have argued that Merton's viewpoint is conservative ideological bias persists even now with too much emphasis on functional aspects. Conflict and change on peripheral side of his sociological analysis. So here critics have argued that Merton is emphasizing too much on functional aspects, that is functional aspect is at the core of Merton's work, and conflict and change is on the peripheral side of his sociological analysis. He says nothing about why something becomes dysfunctional, only explanation in retrospect. When conflict, something dysfunctional must be there. No any criticism of the inherent conflict in American capitalistic society. So we can add more criticism, but when the question will be asked, we should conclude in a positive note. In the next lecture, we will study about reference group. Okay, thank you very much.